Hey guys, it's Archie. I'm back again for another special edition of the ADHD Care podcast. I've got Dana Bishop joining us today virtually from Relax Kids. And so Dana supports, Relax Kids is an organization that supports children's mental and emotional well-being using a range of techniques to help the young person calm their body and build confidence as a result, as well as their self-esteem. Hi, Dana.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm all right. Good, thank you. It's been a while.
Good. Lots going on.
Yeah. So
Lots going on.
What is going on? So I thought I could bring you and just, first of all, catch up with you because I haven't seen you for a while, and also find out to bring you, and because we're doing a podcast, of course, to bring you as a guest and to find out more about Relax Kids, because obviously it's an organisation I've been quite familiar with for a number of years now. And because I get asked a lot by parents in terms of support for children around mental well-being, emotional well-being, and I have, as you know, I've referred a few parents to you.
Yes.
But I thought sometimes it's easier if you just come on a podcast and we can literally signpost people to the podcast to hear about yourself and your organisation and how you operate and how you support young people. So so if we can maybe just just explain to us about what is Relax Kids.
Okay, so Relax Kids is a program teaching relaxation and mindfulness. Although it's called Relax Kids, it's actually can also be used for teenagers, and because often some people think kids, younger children, but the techniques can be used with teenagers, obviously adapted, to the age group, and even with adults. And some Relax Kids coaches actually go into care homes and use some of the techniques with basically, elderly people that live there. So it can really be used across the board. I just thought I'd say how I got involved with it first, if that's okay, because it sort of links it all together.
Yeah, absolutely.
So because of my son's obviously my son is 13 and he's got complex health needs. And from a young age, he was really struggling. He wasn't able to manage and regulate his emotions. And I just thought I need to find something to help him, help his brother, and help us as a family, because it impacts on the whole family basically. And a friend of mine had done the training, and she told me about it. And my background is actually in teaching anyway, so I've always worked with children. So I basically signed up for the course about, I think it was nearly 6 years ago now, 5 years ago. Initially really to help him and his brother and the family, but then it just really took off, because it's been actually proven, psychologists have proven that relaxation and mindfulness can really help children with ADHD to learn to regulate their emotions. And I think the younger you teach it, basically, for children to understand, and be able to process their emotions and understand what is going on, the more the technique sort of becomes, second nature. Because I do actually work with some children who are age 3 in a childminding setting, and they know from a young age, if I do some deep breathing, it could help me when I feel angry or when I feel sad. But I would say it is a technique that it might not work by itself for children with ADHD, but certainly alongside, maybe with other treatments and techniques, it can be a really valuable technique to use.
Excellent. And do you work closely with schools as well, I'm assuming?
Yeah, so I do one-to-ones in people's homes and one-to-ones in school. So for example, at the moment I'm working with a child with ADHD actually, who I did initially meet him in the home environment, but sometimes the home can be quite challenging for a session when the parents are around. So sometimes it actually works better if the school, which they're usually really happy to provide a room for me. And then I go into, the parent arranges it, and I go into the school and see the child in the school setting, which often works better. But I do see a lot of children one-to-one in their homes as well. I also do, haven't done for a while, but I was doing groups in schools. And I can still do that. It's just because my one-to-ones have become really busy actually, and I do really enjoy seeing children on an individual basis. But I do I go to a weekly childminding setting I've been with them for 5 years. And I do things like brownies and cubs, and different organisations that invite me in. But I think it's surprising still how many schools still don't know about Relax Kids, actually.
Yeah.
Because the setting I'm in every week, the head finally kind of realised who I was this week. He said, "Oh, hello, are you a therapist?" And then I told him about what I do. And what I do say is actually, although he said, "Are you a therapist?" what I say to people is, I'm not a therapist, but what I do is I teach children and their families relaxation and mindfulness techniques that they can practice and use in the home. So I just make it clear that I'm not, a psychologist or a psychotherapist or anything like that. But I've just got a real passion for this because, living in a situation myself where I've used the techniques and seen how helpful they can be, that I want to share them, with other children. Shall I tell you about some of the techniques that I actually teach within the session?
Yeah, absolutely.
So, basically, it involves lots of different techniques. So I usually start with mindfulness games, and mindfulness games are great for attention and focus and concentration. And I often find that children who do struggle with that, they actually really enjoy the mindful games, because what I usually do is I try to plan it around one of their hobbies or something that they enjoy. For example, yesterday we were doing a coronation themed Relaxed Kids, because I can theme my sessions as well, which makes them fun. And for the mindfulness game, I had a big tray of lentils, and I'd hidden what we called the crown jewels, and the child had to find them within the lentils. Or I might do something like a child loved football, so I did a quiz, on football facts. Or a game called solitaire, where you have to really concentrate and work out where the marbles need to move on the board. And I find, that really draws them in. And whereas they might struggle normally to concentrate, when it's done in a game technique, they usually really enjoy it. So we start with mindful games. Quite often as well, we at the beginning of the session, we start with a story based on whatever, if we're looking at a particular emotion, say it is anxiety or anger, I'll have an age appropriate book to use to sort of start and open up the session. So one of my favourites for anxieties and worries is The Huge Bag of Worries. So we read that, discuss how important it is to talk about your worries, because that's the moral of that particular story. And then that leads nicely into the rest of the session. And actually it reminds me, one of the techniques that I often teach when I'm talking about anxieties and worries is something called the 5 senses grounding technique.
Right.
And that is all about using, and obviously that's quite a big word if you're using, if I'm doing a session with younger children. So I basically explain to them it's about using your 5 senses, and we talk about what are the 5 senses. And then about using those to help calm you and help bring you back into the moment when those anxieties or even anger is starting to overtake and you just really can't think straight. So they really enjoy that technique, because I talk about things like, I do it a bit differently to often adults are taught, of what they can look at in the room and what they can hear in the room and what they can smell. But I say things like, oh, what's your favourite thing to look at? What makes you happy? What's your favourite smell? What's your favourite thing to eat? What sound makes you happy? And what thing, when you touch it, makes you feel calm or happy? And they often come up with things like a teddy or a hug from mum or dad, or sometimes they say the fidget toys that help them feel calm. So that's a really good technique to teach. So we start with the mindful games, the books, and I teach a bit of self or peer massage if we're in a group, because massage releases feel good chemicals, endorphins in the brain, and that can be really relaxing and calming. And one child I'm working with at the moment, I've got some massage tools, like props that he can use, because I just show them how to do it and they can then use it on themselves, and he finds that really, really relaxing. He struggles to focus with a lot of things, but when it comes to the massage, he just sits there and loves using all the different tools, or massaging his face or his hands. So I teach some massage. Also the deep breathing. So the deep breathing is really important, and it's like an anchor back to the present moment. And in fact, I should have brought one of my pots with me to show you. But quite often when we're talking about deep breathing, I call it deep belly breathing, because you're using your belly at the same time. And I have something called a breathing ball, which is a colourful ball that you open in and out. And I basically demonstrate to the children that that is their belly. And when they're breathing in through their nose and out through their mouth, I'm showing them what their belly is doing with the ball. And obviously they can put their hand on their belly. And I explain that it's the breathing. The breathing needs to be slow, deep breathing, because when it's fast breathing, that isn't going to calm you. It's a deep breathing that helps bring you back into the moment, because what they're doing is focusing on their breathing instead of those emotions that are trying to take over. And I do it not just through the breathing ball. We use feathers. There's slinky toys that you can pull in and out. Quite often, if I'm talking about the worries, we blow away our worries with the blowing bubbles, and talk about blowing them away. So it's all done, in a fun way. It's not just, let's just sit here and do some deep breathing.
Yeah.
We often use a lot of props and tools. Also, affirmations. I talk about the power of affirmations and how that can actually change your mind, and make you have a more positive mindset if you're using those positive words. And actually, again, that's great to teach from a younger age, because we as adults often feel quite self-conscious about saying affirmations, kind words to ourselves. But I find with the 3-year-old, they're actually really confident at looking into a mirror, for example, and saying, I am brave, I am strong. So the power of affirmations is really important as well. And actually, some children are uncomfortable at just saying them aloud. So quite often I use mindful crafts when we're talking about affirmations, and they might create, for example, if we're doing a session on confidence, they might create their cloak of confidence and decorate it with positive, powerful, confident words. So instead of saying them aloud, they're actually seeing them, visually on their cape of confidence, or they're creating an island of calm and happiness. And the idea of that is that the only one rule is there's no worries allowed on that island. And this island can be as sort of wacky as they want it to be. They could have trees made of candy floss and rivers made of chocolate. But the idea is that they can close their eyes and imagine that they are on that island. If they're having worries, again, a lot of children, and like adults, have worries at bedtime and struggle to get to sleep. So that's a good technique if they want to just close their eyes and imagine that they're on their island of happiness. Mm-hmm. And then we always end the session with meditation. So kind of we started off a bit the session more lively, and then worked down through to the meditation at the end, when they can basically be calm. And there's loads of lovely Relax Kids meditation books that I use for my sessions. And it gives them a chance to just, close their eyes and use their imagination. And often we just don't have time in busy lives, do we, to be still. So actually that technique is one of the techniques that it's obviously really important, but can take longer sometimes for children to be comfortable with lying still and just closing their eyes. Sometimes they start with sitting up and just listening to it, or sometimes with children that really struggle to focus, what I actually do is, whilst they're doing the mindful craft, I read the meditation whilst they're doing it, so they don't feel that pressure of, I have to lie down, I have to close my eyes, I have to, kind of be still and listen. They can actually just sort of be listening to it whilst they're busy creating their island or their cape, or, whatever it may be. Because I do know, children can struggle with that bit, to be, still and quiet. So, that's sort of in a nutshell, the techniques that I teach.
Amazing. With the young people that you work, what's the youngest age group that you work with?
So basically 3-year-olds. So in the childminding setting I mentioned, actually some of them even start to joining when they're 2, because I go there weekly. So what they start to do is the childminders who run the setting kind of get them to dip in and out of parts of the session and listen in.
Right.
But basically usually 3-year-olds, and quite often with the younger ones, I will do a shorter session, which is half an hour instead of an hour, because obviously an hour is a long time for little ones to focus. Yeah. But even sometimes with older children, actually, who find it difficult to focus and concentrate, I do a shorter session because I'd rather a child get most out of the session within half an hour than be stretching it out to an hour and they're really, they've had enough basically. So half an hour sessions I can do as well.
So with some of these techniques, if you think about young people that might struggle with emotional dysregulation, which is very common with ADHD, they might get angry quite easily, get frustrated, irritable.
Yes.
In terms of transferring some of these techniques in those situations, i.e. in school, amongst other peers in social situations, how do you find young people are able to implement or remember what they've learned through your kind of sessions?
Yeah, I think it does take a lot of practice, and it's not just me going in and doing one session. It might be a period of maybe 6 sessions. And also, I reiterate to the parents that they need to sort of keep reminding their child to practice at home. I think it's really important to remember that these sort of techniques aren't like a magic wand and they, help overnight. They're techniques, like with everything we learn, I suppose, even like learning to read, those techniques at school, you need to continue to practice them. So, it could be helpful if I do a period of sessions with the child, because we repeat obviously the different techniques each week, and also for parents to encourage their children to practice these techniques at home. And it's really helpful, I think, if the school are on board as well with these different techniques. So one of the things I do to sort of reinforce the practice at home is to maybe create a calm box, so that then a child has got a toolbox of resources that they can use and go to, when they feel these emotions, try and get to using them before, they erupt basically and go from 0 to 100, trying to acknowledge that and really understand their emotions and how they're feeling. And I put things in these calm boxes, like, for example, if we were doing feather breathing, they could put a feather into the box. They might put a picture of somebody they love or something that makes them feel happy into the box. Sometimes we make something called a breathing stick, which is basically a pipe cleaner with 10 beads on. And as they breathe in and out, they move the beads along. Another tool that they could use that could go into their box. Or I used to call them fidget toys, but I actually learned recently from my son Senko. I thought he'd gone on a course and said focus tools instead of saying fidget, because actually we often think of fidgeting as being a negative thing. So actually, I think by calling them focus tools, it's true. These toys help children to focus. For me, I'd find them distracting. But my son really finds if he's using one of these focus tools, it actually focuses his mind. Yeah. So things like that going into the box, or maybe a meditation book, or some affirmations written down. So I find that, if they've got a toolbox of techniques, that can help them to remind them to go to this toolbox. And as I say, again, I think, with the school being on board as well, and with the breathing techniques, which I think are really powerful. And I talk about this during my sessions. I say, if I had to choose one of the techniques, I think deep breathing would probably be my main one, because it's that technique that you can just do very quickly, and to just help your mind to focus, and take over from those big emotions. And I often teach hand breathing, where you go up and down your fingers, breathing in and out, obviously doing all of them. And I say that is a technique you can use anywhere. So you don't need a feather, you don't need a breathing stick. You can put your hand under the desk at school and, take your deep breath. You can sit in the back of the car on a school bus or something and use that technique. So I think the key thing is practicing these techniques, realizing that they can be used alongside maybe other therapies that you might already be using or treatments. And not expecting it to be a miracle overnight. But certainly with my son, he's got a severe needle phobia because of treatments he's had to have for his medical needs. And it has taken a long time, but he is now at the point where he allows my husband to do the injection with no help. It would usually take 3 of us to hold him. And all he does now is he shouts out, "I am brave, I am brave, I am brave." And that is because, it's taken a long time to get to that point with him. But I have taught him, the power of affirmations and these positive words. I definitely think they can be really helpful, but it takes practice. And I was going to say actually earlier, the psychologists, and I'm just reading it because I'll forget their names, that have actually proven that mindfulness practices can strengthen the areas of the brain responsible for attention, emotional control and problem solving. That they're the psychologists Kirk Strazel and Patricia Robinson. They've written in this moment. I couldn't remember their names, so that's why I had to read them. But I thought it's great that research has been done to prove that mindfulness and relaxation techniques can help, with ADHD.
And I suppose some of these techniques as well, they're quite useful in any situation. I'm thinking for young teenagers about to sit their GCSEs or A-level exams, and they're feeling quite stressed and anxious leading up to it. That's just one of the many examples where you can implement some of these strategies. In fact, on the other end of the spectrum, I've been invited into a nursery for the last half term to do 7 sessions leading up to the children leaving to start primary school, so that they've got these techniques ready at hand to help them, when they're feeling anxious in a new setting. And I've got some lovely books that I use about preparing children, to start school. But definitely, yes, any of these sort of situations with exams, the SATs, the GCSEs. I've worked with, a teenager last year who was, she was an 11-year-old sitting her 11 plus and getting very stressed about those exams. So I went in for a few sessions at home and gave her the techniques and tools to use. And the feedback that I get, is really positive, where parents are saying that their child has said, it really helped. They did some deep breathing. They said, "I can do this." They said their affirmations before they went in and sat the exam. And I'm also working with a charity, actually, because my son's got a life-threatening kidney condition. So the charity have actually employed me as their relaxation and wellbeing coach, because a lot of the children with the kidney condition, nephrotic syndrome, they really struggle with emotions, because it's like being on a roller coaster living with any complex medical condition. And so I've been working with children all around the country through Zoom, and the charity actually fund 2 sessions per family for any children that want the sessions, to give them the techniques to help them, manage their emotions. The work that you do with parents or carers, can you just describe to us what that looks like?
So I basically also offer parent relaxation. I haven't been doing so much of that recently. I was working for an organisation where I wrote my own course and then was teaching it all around Surrey. But because I wrote the course myself, I'm still able to use it and teach it to parents, either individually or groups. So, for example, an organisation called Family Voice Surrey, who support parents of children with ADHD and ASD, and also a local ADHD support group to me. The organisers, one of them was on Zoom, one of them was in person, invited me in to talk about the techniques that I teach children, but also at the same time giving parents the tools for themselves, because I know firsthand being a parent carer can be really exhausting, mentally draining, and it's really important to have some time for yourself. So it's the same sort of techniques, but obviously in an adult way. So we will do a meditation that is obviously much longer, We talk about the power of affirmations. So all of the techniques I talked about earlier, but basically taught to adults. And I also wrote a course for the organisation I was working for, but now do it independently, how to manage your children's anxiety and stress. So using mindfulness and relaxation. So basically we talk about, what anxiety and stress is, what causes it, what are the symptoms, and then we talk about how mindfulness and relaxation, and actually not just mindfulness and relaxation, how there are other techniques as well as mindfulness and relaxation can help children manage anxiety and stress. And I think I was going to say one of the key things as well, I think, is that I teach is children understanding what is actually going on in their brain when they're feeling these big emotions. So, we often explain it with adults. We talk about the fight, flight, freeze response. But with children, we talk about it in a more simplified way where we talk about animals. So we talk about it's the meerkat. If you think about a meerkat, they're always upright and so they're looking for danger. And it's your meerkat protecting you when that fight, flight, freeze response takes over. But the part of the brain we want to be in control is the frontal cortex, which is what we call the wise owl, which helps you be logical, helps you with understanding and reasoning. But sometimes to protect you, your meerkat, your amygdala takes over. And so by teaching these mindfulness and relaxation techniques, their wise owl can take control when they feel that meerkat is overtaking. They can use their memory, which we call, I've even forgotten what the memory is myself now. Talking about memory, we talk about their elephant,
right?
Because the elephant never forgets, apparently.
Right.
So we say you can remember these techniques like your elephant, so that when you feel the meerkat taking over, you use these techniques to help your wise owl be in control. And they really do get that. And sometimes I have puppets, depending on the age. And I remember when I first started this, my 3-year-old was hearing that my 7-year-old at the time was having a big meltdown. And he said, "Mummy, it's his meerkat." He really understood from 3 years old because he heard me talk about it. He used to come to groups I used to teach. And the child that was having the meltdown, I'd always talk to him about what was happening. And then he did get to the point where he'd say, "It's not my fault, it's my meerkat." But obviously then you need to move on from that, of using those techniques to help calm the meerkat. So I think it really helps as well if they've got an understanding of what is going on when they're feeling these big emotions and those emotions are taking over.
Yeah, it sounds like, obviously, like if young persons receiving some therapy, like through CBT, for example, cognitive behavior therapy, it's got that element of a kind of a CBT model to it, isn't it? Like the emotional literacy, labeling your emotions, knowing how these emotions present in your body. Like I don't know, do you cover things like when your heart is beating fast, when you're sweaty
definitely.
palms?
I'm glad you I'm glad you raised that point, actually, because one of the techniques I do is draw around the child. I've got a huge rolled out piece of paper, draw around them, which they usually love, with the younger children anyway. And then we talk about these different places that you feel these emotions in your body. So then they might write on their hands sweaty palms, or with me, when I'm nervous, my hands go freezing cold. I do the opposite. Or they might draw a heart and put heart racing, or headache, caused by anxieties and worries, tummy ache, feeling like butterflies. So you're exactly right, naming and labeling these feelings and emotions. And quite often when I go into a big group session and I'm feeling quite nervous, I'm really honest with the children. And when I'm talking about these different techniques, and I say, when I came in today, I said I was feeling really nervous outside. My hands were cold. My heart was beating fast. So I took some deep breaths and I said to myself, "You can do this." For them to understand that actually adults feel these emotions as well. Because I've worked with some children who actually have been quite shocked to realise that adults feel these emotions as well, because some adults do actually hide their emotions from their children. And I think it's important to, you know, express your emotions. I'm not talking about totally losing it, but, you know, showing when you're sad, saying you're crying, explaining why, because I think, you know, if they learn that we all feel these emotions as well, that really helps.
Yeah, absolutely, 100% on that. And I was going to raise a point just now, completely slipped my mind.
A bit like me with my memory with the elephant. We aren't elephants today, we're forgetting.
We are, yeah, completely.
I
think it's around, I think we covered the emotional literacy. I was going to bring up a point. It's a good point I was going to bring up, actually. But anyway, it's completely slipped my mind. I'll definitely.
Oh, it's so annoying, isn't it, when that happens?
Hence why I should be jotting down some of my. I should have a notepad next to me.
I've got notes with me actually to help me remember certain points that I thought you might want me to talk about. So it does help.
So maybe tell us about the structure of Relax Kids, the company itself, like how many therapies you have, whereabouts you're based.
Well, to be honest with you, to be honest with you, the actual structure of Relax Kids, I don't know how many coaches there are. I know there are coaches training and joining all the time. There are coaches all around the world, in different countries, Australia, I think South Africa, Europe. So I know that there are coaches all over the world. I wouldn't be able to tell you every single country, but it's a worldwide, basically, organisation. And Marnetta, who set up the organisation, she actually started off, she was a children's entertainer, and what she was finding when she was doing parties was that children were really struggling to focus even at a party, watching the entertainer. And she had a passion for mindfulness and relaxation, and she thought, how can I put this together? And she created Relax Kids, and I don't know how many years ago it was at least 20. I should know these facts off by head, but I'm afraid these are the things that I don't know. But there's a Relax Kids website that you can have a look at for all information about the organisation, and also the different resources, because they've got more that are added all the time. In fact, Marnette has recently written, I think it's 3 new books. There is also a brilliant book called The Imaginarium for teenagers, which basically is about thinking of what emotion that you're feeling that day, and then looking through the book and thinking, which meditation do I want to listen to based on how your emotion, so the different chambers of the brain, she calls it in this book. So there's different books ranging from 3-year-olds up to teenagers, and also different resources and CDs, downloads as well, so a lot of people prefer downloads now. It's a big organisation, but I need to find out these numbers actually myself, because I just know they're increasing all the time, more and more people with training to be coaches.
And when you work with a young person online, virtually, trying to teach these techniques, is it still quite as effective as doing in person?
It is actually. I was really kind of thinking during COVID and lockdown, I was thinking, oh my goodness, how is this going to work? And like a lot of us, we were kind of forced into Zoom, weren't we, online for the first time, and thinking, oh gosh, out of your comfort zone. But actually, it was one of the positive things that sort of came out of lockdown, because I realised it really does work online as well. I mean, there are some children, of course, who it just won't work for them because they need to be face to face, and they'll just be distracted, at the other end of the screen. But the techniques can be taught online as well as they can be in person. And I just adapt, obviously, some of the games that I normally have, that are a practical game in my hands that I normally play with a child. I can't do that with a child online, but I've adapted mindfulness games that we can use through the screen. So I've been really pleased, and the feedback that I've had from parents, especially through the charity I'm working with, because it's more now that I just do the online sessions with them, because obviously I see people face to face now. I've had really positive feedback. In fact, one child, I've only ever obviously seen her online. She's all the way up in Leeds. Her mum took her to see a psychologist for their sort of follow-up appointment. And she sent me a lovely message saying the psychologist couldn't believe it was the same child. How, you know, much of an improvement she'd seen in this child with her, basically how she felt about herself and emotionally. And she said, whatever you've been doing, continue doing it, which then obviously mum told her about our sessions. And as I said, a charity initially offered the 2 paid for funded sessions, but mum's continued for me to continue working with her daughter because they've really seen the benefits, and that's online. So it shows it really does work virtually. Yeah. So for those families that live further away, or it just doesn't work with work commitments for the parent, you know, with them being at home, it's great now that I can offer this as well as face-to-face appointments.
Yeah, and with the it helps. With the resources and the tools that you use for your sessions, if it's done virtually, do you ask the parents to purchase the materials beforehand, or how does that work?
Sometimes what I do, depending on how many sessions. So if I'm only doing a few, I don't always need the actual physical tool. So we'll do hand breathing.
Right.
I'll show them the breathing ball, and then the parent might then buy one for the future to practice with. Sometimes I've then actually sent resources, like one child I was working with for a longer period of time. Parent gave me her address so that I could then send the beads and the pipe cleaner used for the breathing stick. Or the parent might be quite happy to say, do you know what, we've got some feathers at home. So sometimes we think outside the box, and I say, have you got any of these things at home that you could use? But otherwise, there's always ways around it. I think I learned that during lockdown. You really had to try and think outside of the box, didn't you? And use your imagination. So, but yeah, some parents do choose to buy the resources, so I can send them as well, like small things in the post if we get to that point where we feel they'll be beneficial.
Yeah, and the resources themselves, they can be bought through Relax Kids website or different.
So the things like the books and the downloads, CDs, they can be bought through Relax Kids website. The things like, as I said, it's a shame I forgot to bring my breathing ball with me, it's downstairs. But actually, if parents just type in breathing ball, it does come up. It's a colourful ball, and you can buy them from Amazon, and I think they're under £5. And the great thing is that a lot of the things that I use are really cheap to buy, or don't cost much at all. Feathers, you can get anywhere. Great thing about feathers, I use those multi-purpose. They use those to practice the breathing, like blowing a feather off their hand or holding it and breathing and blowing the feather. Or the feather's great for a massage. So they love that on their face, arms, hands. So feathers are one of my favourite props because it could be used for a couple of different things, the massage and the deep breathing.
It's not just children with ADHD that you work with. Do you also work with children that have like autism, for example?
Yeah, I have worked with some children with ASD. Obviously, as we said, ADHD as well. And to be honest, what I say to parents is that, because some parents think that there kind of has to be maybe an issue going on related to emotional dysregulation for me to be involved in practice my sessions with their child. But I think the most beneficial thing is, I think children all need to learn these techniques, as I said earlier, from a young age.
No, I agree.
Because if they learn them from a young age, like learning to read, learning to count, it becomes second nature to them. And I have found, I say, it's most powerful seeing the little ones I work with in the child-minded setting, because they are the youngest I've worked with, and that the techniques become second nature to them instead of introducing them when they're older. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. It's great whatever age you learn. But I think, gosh, I wish I learned these when I was younger, and I wish my eldest was younger when I learned more about these techniques, because as I said, I think it then becomes the tool that they just go to, as a natural thing.
Yeah. And why do you think a lot of parents are not familiar with Relax Kids? Is that I'm just thinking.
Yeah, do you know? I think more people.
Yeah, go on.
Yeah, I think more people are becoming aware of it.
Yeah.
Than when I started 6 years ago. I think because more people have trained as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I think parents stumble across it sort of by accident, because when people contact me, to be honest with you, 90% of my work is word of mouth, which is lovely because it's all recommendations. But then the odd occasion I'll get an email that comes through, and like recently a parent said, oh, they'd gone onto the Relax Kids website, I think because they stumbled across it by accident, and then they could see that there are coaches in different areas, and then they got my details, because you can find different coaches on there as well. That's another thing, in the areas that they're usually, based in. So she's got my details off of the website and then contacted me. So I think quite often people do stumble across Relax Kids. Sometimes they have heard of it because there's a Relax Kids coach in the school. And as I say, although Relax Kids coaches are very busy, I actually don't know why, people still aren't aware of Relax Kids, as they should be, really. But yeah. I think people are starting to find out more, because I think relaxation and wellbeing over the last few years as a technique is more recognised.
Yeah.
So whereas before, even probably going back 10 years, people saw relaxation and mindfulness. Some people saw it as being a bit wacky, a bit out there. But I think people are realising the benefits. And actually, that was another thing I was just going to say, because one of the things I talk about when I do my course that I teach, I talk about the benefits of mindfulness. And it's been proven that mindfulness relieves stress, it improves mental health, it helps focus our attention, and helps us gain an awareness of our emotion, and physically as well. It can help lower blood pressure, although I always say, obviously if you've got a health condition you're concerned about, then obviously always speak to your GP. But it can help lower blood pressure, reduce chronic pain. My mum has got a chronic pain condition, and every night she listens to meditation to help her sleep. And actually added to that, it can improve sleep. And it's been proven to help with stomach disorders as well. So there are a lot of proven benefits, and I think now that people are realizing that, it's becoming a more recognized practice, that people will consider.
Yeah, that and that should be prescribed by even GPs.
I agree, and in fact, some GPs. You've just reminded me I should go around to my GPs again. Some GPs, actually, ages ago, I left my cards because the GP was talking to me about it and was actually recommending me, because they obviously see a lot of children at the beginning of this, when parents are recognising that there are issues. Often the first thing with their child regulating their emotions, often the first port of call is they go to their GP. And then obviously sometimes that leads to, possibly a referral to the paediatrician, and then being assessed, or a private therapist. But, he was actually recognising that in giving out my card, and realising actually sometimes these children don't need to be assessed. It doesn't need to go further. Sometimes just these techniques are enough.
Yeah.
And quite often I'm seeing children who, because as we know, I know you're private, but the waiting list for the NHS for assessments is, I think it's still about 3 years. It's a long process.
Yeah.
I see a lot of children whose parents have contacted me, in desperation, and they want something, and I can at least start with teaching the child these techniques while they're waiting as well, to be assessed.
No, absolutely, I agree, and I think it's with the whole kind of primary care, like schools, GPs, health visitors, and cause they're the ones that that's where, as you say, that's where the parents would usually turn to in the first instance if they are struggling with the child's emotions. And before you go down the route of maybe looking for a formal diagnosis, it's even if the child eventually gets assessed and diagnosed with either ADHD or autism or any other condition, it's always still quite useful, irregardless of whether you have a diagnosis or not, just for
definitely. In fact,
to learn.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, funniest of places, I was at a car boot sale at the weekend, and I actually bumped into 3 parents who I used to do Relax Kids with their children. And yes, they have now got to the point where they are diagnosed and there's different issues going on. But they still really thank me for the techniques that I teach. And one of them she had a breathing ball that they no longer use because the children are a lot older. She didn't realise it was me. And I said, how much is that? And then she realised it was me. She said, you can have that for free, she said, because I know what you're going to use that for and how valuable that will be. And I said, oh, thank you, because my other one's been so well loved and used, it's now broken. But so it's nice to hear, okay, not so nice to hear that there's now other issues and they have had a diagnosis, but that they still appreciate that those techniques did help, and are still helping alongside sometimes, with other things as well.
Yeah. And if people want to reach out to you, how do they get in touch?
So basically, I have got a Facebook page is one of the ways, which is Relax Kids, Tadworth and Walton with Dana. And it's a bit of a mouthful, so I don't know whether you can type it in somewhere for people to know. And then also people can email me. And obviously call me as well, so I can give you those details. So I think you've got them actually on one of my cards that I gave you ages ago.
Yeah.
But they can basically message me on my Facebook page, or my email is actually relaxkidsdana@gmail.com, or my number, which you can add as well if you like. So they can contact me in any way, and then I'll either email message you back, and then usually I give the parent a call and we have a chat, because it's easier to kind of chat through the issues before we then usually arrange a session. And what usually happens is we usually arrange, one session first, see if the child enjoys it, which they usually do. And then 9 out of 10 times, parents then call me back and say, oh, can you do another session? Can you do another session? And I think the important thing to say as well, for those children who've been nervous initially about seeing me, that they've quite quickly realised that actually what we do is fun, and we're not just sitting there and I'm questioning them about their emotions and how they feel. These conversations all come around in a fun way during the session. Like I've got conversation cubes where I throw them and they've got questions on, and they like choosing the colour, and then actually what they don't realise is I'm finding out a bit more about their emotions as well, because some of the questions are simple things like your favourite ice cream, but then one of the questions might be, oh, can you tell me a time when you were brave, or when did you last feel sad? So they're actually opening up a bit, but it's all through games and fun. And I think once they've realised that, they say, oh, can I have another session, please? Because they realise we're not sat at a desk and I'm just questioning them.
Yeah.
They usually enjoy it.
And in terms of parents wanting to reach out to you, or them not sitting here or listening to this podcast and thinking, because sometimes it can be quite difficult to know what your child needs. Sometimes what we usually hear, parents might think, oh, my child might have autism, ADHD, or my child is struggling with emotions and things, to then work out, or maybe reach out to you. I'm trying to see whether that fits that whole conversation around, or maybe my child could benefit from seeing Dana to learn about meditation and relaxation. For that to, I don't think it's something that crosses people's minds a lot. Generally, I think they might think therapy rather than, oh, I want them to learn about techniques to be able to relax.
Yes, I see what you mean. Like they might more book a child in to see a psychologist or a psychotherapist or something like that, rather than, or CBT or something, rather than the relaxation and mindfulness techniques. I think the important message is realizing, as I briefly touched on earlier, is that these techniques are, I think, vital for any child. So there's no harm in discussing it with me, in trying it, in seeing if you think it's the right thing for your child. Because personally, I know I say I'm biased, I teach it, but I am so passionate about it, and I believe these techniques are beneficial to every child, whether you think they're struggling to regulate their emotions or actually you think they're the most calm child on the planet. These techniques are valuable, because that child who's really calm at the present moment, in the future can face challenges and difficult emotions where these techniques will always be valuable to use. So, But so I think it's always basically, worth trying.
Yeah. You touched on it briefly earlier, which I usually hear as well in my clinic. Children that struggle to go to sleep. And usually, because obviously during the day, they're quite distracted, they're busy, they get to bed, they're laying there, their mind is constantly racing and they're thinking about all different things. Some of them are starting to worry. Yes. And what advice would you give to parents or to that young person?
I've been through this myself with my own son, and I know how challenging it can be for the whole family. Because as you said, it's that time of day, and I talk to children about this, where your mind isn't quiet, your mind is busy, but the environment around you is usually quiet. So that is the time, children and adults, our minds often start racing and thinking about things that you're maybe worried about, and then you struggle to go to sleep. So there's a few different techniques I use. So sometimes I give children little worry dolls that they can put underneath their pillow. They're the little South African tiny dolls, with the idea that you put them underneath your pillow and they can take your worries away while you're sleeping. As I say, these are all age appropriate to the age of the child I'm working with. Yeah. Some children really like the worry monsters. You can get them all in different colours. They've got a zip on their mouth, where the idea is before they go to bed, they write their worries down, or their parent helps them. They put them in the worry monster's mouth, and the worry monster eats the worries whilst they're asleep. Obviously, the parent needs to remember to remove the worries at night. And it's not saying, oh, your worries can just disappear. It's just a technique to add to help calm their mind, if they've got these worries at bedtime. Sometimes I give children, again depending on their age, something that I call a calm stone, or a calm jewel, and they can have that at bedtime. They keep it in a little organza bag, and if they wake up in the night, one boy I work with, I keep saying boys, but I work with lots of girls as well. One boy I was working with, he would wake up in the middle of the night with nightmares. So he would then get the calm stone and hold it in his hands, because it was nice and cool on his hand, and do some deep breathing, like take 10 deep breaths while he held his calm stone, and then try and lay back down and go to sleep. And of course, you've also got the meditation, which is great to use at bedtime. Either a parent can read it from one of the many books, they could listen to a download or a CD. And I think they're, really help to calm your mind, because especially on the downloads and the CDs, it's Marnetta who reads them, and her voice is so soothing. But sometimes children prefer the voice of a parent, a loved one, so might prefer a book. But the great thing about the CDs and the downloads, you can have that on and they can listen to that instead of you having to continuously read it as they're falling asleep. So I know, again, these things might not happen overnight. They can take time, but at least there's some tools. And the one I mentioned earlier as well, actually, is that island of happiness or island of calm, which they often create with me in a session, and then visualizing that if they're struggling to get to sleep, or they've got these worries taking over, and close their eyes and imagine that they're on that island. And as the children are creating them, I did this with a big group of brownies last week, they were really smiling and enjoying creating it. And I was saying to them, look how it's making you feel, creating that island. So there's just a few different techniques that I talk about when children are struggling with sleep.
I remember what I was going to ask you earlier. You just popped in my head, so I need to ask you now.
Came back to the elephant brain.
That's it. I'm very familiar with the concept of CBT, and sometimes we use a concept called externalizing. Try to move the concept of, it's your fault, you are having anxiety, or it's, for them not to see it as it's them. So you might then try, I think you were using kind of like the analogy of like an elephant or something, like the different animals you mentioned there.
The meerkat taking over that fight, flight, freeze response, the amygdala, which we call the meerkat.
Yeah, that's it. So in some cases, let's say a young person is really like passionate about football, for example, and you can maybe relate a football player that they really like, and like, I don't know, Harry Kane, and say, it's normal to feel worried. Harry Kane does feel worried before he goes onto the football pitch, before he plays a match. And how would you think he feels, and what is it that he can do? Do you ever use that kind of model, like removing it from you to, okay, let's think of another person, it's a character.
Oh, definitely. And in fact, Yeah, and in fact, it's funny you should say that football one.
Yeah.
Because that football analogy I use comes up a lot because I work with a lot of children who like football.
Right.
And in fact, I've got an old article I printed out ages ago, and it was all about Wayne Rooney and shows how old it was, but him in particular using affirmations before he goes onto the pitch. Mm-hmm. And I obviously talk about him, but lots of other players usually do this before they go onto the pitch, or pop stars. They get together. Sometimes they huddle in a circle and they say, they have mantras, that they often say together before they go out onto the stage. So I definitely, and I think it's really powerful when they realise, that somebody that they admire, their idol, does this. Oh, right. Well, actually, that is interesting. And in fact, with my son, one of the key moments for him, he's now 13, to think, what you're teaching, Mum, isn't a load of rubbish, was he was watching I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, and Boy George was using a lot of affirmations and deep breathing, and he said, oh, he uses what you teach, and it really helps him. And it was like, okay, you'll listen to a celebrity, but you won't listen to me because I'm just your boring mum. But when somebody else says it, who that maybe is on the TV or who they look up to, that can be really helpful as well. Definitely, very powerful.
That's it. And we know a lot of them have like their own rituals, like before they go to perform on stage or go and play a football game. They follow, like some of them do meditation, relaxation, listen to music, calm breathing, all of these techniques that you can then, the young person can go.
And I think what's helped is actually a lot of these celebrities talk about this more openly now. So, for example, Marcus Rashford is one of my son's heroes. So he's written some amazing books about mindfulness, and I think more and more of these people in the public eye are talking about relaxation and mindfulness, and there's television programs on about anxiety and how these celebrities have used mindfulness and relaxation, and it's really helped them. So I think it's becoming, more, I suppose it's, in the public eye now, people are talking about it a lot more.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think it's certainly from a young age, understanding how, what's going on through your body life. You're starting to feel, tense, your heart's beating fast. That emotional literacy, definitely, I think I agree. I think teaching kids to learn and understand emotions, because it's quite overwhelming. Like for that age, if you think that they're going through all these big feelings, emotions, not really understanding what's going on, and thinking that it's
and
just
it can
them.
be really it can be, sorry to interrupt.
No,
it can be really frightening. It can be really frightening, and they can think, what on earth is going on? My friend's daughter, actually, she was having really bad stomach problems, and they actually got her seen by a consultant, and were looking, doing scans and all sorts, and cutting out things from her diet because they really didn't know what was going on. She moved up into a different class at school, and they actually then realized that she was then okay. Her tummy problems all went away, and they realized it was because another child in the class was actually bullying her, and this child had been put into a different class. And once they were separated, the tummy problems went away. So it was actually all anxiety based. But maybe if she was better able to recognize, some people get these really bad tummies if they're feeling anxious, or in these situations, this could cause headaches, or it feels like butterflies in your tummy. Or with me, my stress goes straight to my shoulders and my back, and up my neck, and I get a headache. Acknowledging what these emotions can cause physically, and then being able to verbalize them. And my 13-year-old, he's now got to the point, he is quite immature for his age, because often children with ADHD I think it's 3 years emotionally, younger than his chronological age. But he will say things like, if his brother's winding him up, Mum, I'm going to lose it in a minute. So he's actually able to tell us that he's getting to that point, and will actually go up to his bedroom and shut the door. Whereas when he was younger, he would erupt like a volcano, go from the 0 to 100, as we said. And obviously it doesn't help if your brother's winding you up, but he's able to realize those feelings are coming, And I think actually that also relates to the Coke bottle analogy as well, when children have been suppressing emotions all day at school or often an educational setting, holding all their emotions in front of the teachers and other pupils. And then we wonder why, we get it in the neck when they get home and they might suddenly erupt and have a meltdown.
Yeah.
And it's, as I say, it's called that Coke bottle analogy, because of the fizz all coming out. Yeah. Because obviously we are the people closest to them. And it's often with us that they feel that they can express these big emotions.
Yeah.
So it's learning these techniques, perhaps thinking, well, actually, when they come home from school can be a really difficult time. What could they do? Could they go and have some chill out time in their bedroom? They've got their calm box there if they need it. Not asking, too many questions when they get home, which we all do, or was guilty of doing as parents. What have you been doing today? Actually, yeah. Sometimes they just want to be quiet and have that downtime. Because they've been holding in a lot of emotions all day. A bit like we do as adults, when we're being professional, we might be actually having a really bad day, but we hold it in professionally in front of our colleagues.
Yep.
I describe this to parents. We then get home to our husband or wife, our other half, and they say, "How was your day?" And we lose it with them because they're the closest person to us.
Yeah, of course. I'm sure you're very familiar with the whole concept of masking that you're describing there.
Of course.
Yeah, we see this a lot.
Masking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
And I think...
And that's exhausting.
Yeah, the point I was just going to make in terms of, I know you work with schools, but certainly that... Is there any thought about incorporating relaxation meditation in the curriculum, maybe? I don't know.
Some schools... Yeah, some schools are already doing that and recognising over the last few years, in fact, really since the impact of lockdown, and realising that mental health issues are on the increase. But before the lockdown, I used to teach my course, and it was 1 in 5 children have diagnosed with a mental health issue, and now it's 1 in 3. So it really is on the increase. So apparently, there is more funding that is going into schools. I think teachers are teaching more techniques, but obviously, they teach usually, I think, the odd bit here and there. It's not always, a weekly session. But I think that there is hope, and that schools and education in general are realising how important relaxation and wellbeing is. I mean, I get emails home from my son's school. As I say, it's just been because of my schedule at the moment. I've been focusing a lot more on the one-to-ones and other different work that I do. But, this is the reason I haven't been going in there. I used to run an after-school club before lockdown. But they do send home, like in newsletters, sometimes different tips about relaxation and well-being and mental health. So I think it is definitely more recognised now, which is good.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard that there is definitely more funding that is supposed to be going into schools for mental health support.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, COVID and lockdown highlighted the whole issues with emotional well-being even more, like with the whole isolation.
Oh, definitely.
And the effects of that, you can see it even up to now, like 3 years later. It's still, people think like, we're out of lockdown and things have just gone back to normal, but it's still, people are still struggling as a result. They haven't.
Oh, definitely. I've seen the impact in different ways, where children either loved being at home and were then very anxious about going back into the setting. Children who find it very difficult being at home, e.g. my eldest son, because he lost control of everything he could do. So then struggled with mental health in that way, because they wanted to be in school, they wanted to be doing all the things that they normally do. And then there are children who've become quite obsessive in showing OCD type behaviours of hand washing and things to do with germs, because of obviously the whole thing we did, constantly washing your hands and things like that. So have got showing some OCD type behaviour as well. So, and like you said, people think, oh, it was 3 years ago. No, the impact is ongoing, definitely.
Yeah, of course. And amazing work that you guys are doing at Relax Kids, and I can talk to you for longer. Yeah, certainly, and of course I'll keep utilising your services, and I think it's a vital support system you have in place for most of our young people that we see that struggle with emotions, understanding emotions, dealing with emotions. And certainly some of these techniques can also work in the adult population as well. Just listen to you there, because we see adults as well, and irregardless whether you have a diagnosis or not. And I think it should be just something that people can just learn and implement naturally and incorporate it within your daily routine, like waking up, doing some relaxation techniques before you face the day, or and certainly in the evening, going to bed, or even throughout the day as well. Like now, we've gone through this exam season with students that we're seeing struggling, worrying, anxiety, understandably. But yeah, it's definitely worth implementing some of these techniques. Yeah,
because physical exercise is seen as such an important thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's making this as important as that, like you're saying, on that daily basis. Some deep breathing, listening to a meditation, doing it daily.
Yeah.
As important as exercise. This is just as valuable.
Of course. Dana, absolute pleasure catching up with you.
Oh, lovely.
And
lovely to talk to you as well.
Yeah, of course. And we'll catch up soon. And I will obviously send you the audio and video recording of this podcast, so you can watch and share with some of your clients. And certainly we'll be doing the same thing on our social media pages and through just signposting some of our clients to you as well. Very vital information that you're saying there, and I think it helped me to understand, because I know we've had chats over the years and stuff, but to get a full insight from you, understand the work that you're doing, and how beneficial this is certainly to our client group. It's really been very an eye opener. So yeah, thanks for sharing your time with us.
No problem. Sorry, I had to cancel the other week, but we got here in the end.
Yes, we did. Absolutely. Yeah, that's up.
It's lovely seeing you.
And you, and look after yourself.
Yeah, and you take care, Julia, and I'll get those cards.
Thanks. Yeah, please.
That's prompted me now. That job's got to go on the top of my list to get new cards printed.
Exactly.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Dana. Take care. Bye.
Bye.